Did you ever wonder that maybe in a different timeline, I wouldn't have never met you or have never married you?
No, in every timeline, you wind up marrying me.
I mean, maybe, I guess. But
Mm,
think about it this way, like the first time that I met you, you were standing kind of gross and sweaty because, it's your first time in
yes.
Taiwan. It was very hot. So for all my people who have been living in very hot and humid
Mm,
places like Taiwan, to stand in the shade when you're waiting for the light to cross, right? Or waiting for the
no.
light to cross the no,
No.
you don't stand in the blazing sun.
Yeah.
And so I remember this was the story that he was like, why is everyone standing in the shade all the way in the back?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's how you should do it. Anyway, rewind back to where I met you. You were just really sweaty and your beard was like all over the place. Imagine if that was the only interaction I ever got with you. That split
Mm.
glance, split second, and I walked away and we never interacted again.
Yeah, no, I totally see your point. But I think that's the thing. A lot of really important critical moments in our lives come down to first impressions.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have the luxury of building on that first impression and maybe
Mhm.
challenging it or, adding to it. And sometimes we don't.
Sometimes we don't, and that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like, how many times have we literally walked past someone or took a glance and we already make these
Mm,
judgments in our head?
yeah.
Being like, oh, this person's mean or this person's nice or pretty or handsome or
Yeah.
whatever it is, We do it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just that with some people, such as, you and I, we got more time to interact
Mm,
to kind of build on that
yeah.
initial impression.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's really fascinating because they've actually studied this. The findings were it took zero point 0.1 seconds
Wow.
to make a judgment about a person, about their attractiveness, their trustworthiness, their aggression.
Mhm.
So, yeah, no, first impressions are just
Like,
microseconds.
yeah,
Yeah,
so important. Subconsciously, we've already made this judgment call, right?
yeah.
But consciously, we haven't quite caught up yet. But
Mm,
sometimes if it's someone that's attractive, that we deem as attractive
mm,
in that millisecond, that zero point 0.1 second, or what happens in our body? What happens like we were actually maybe trying to impress them without we
mm.
even realize? So we're going to talk about first impressions. That's what we're going to talk about today.
And peacocking. No, I mean, yeah. So first impressions, it's about. Well, think about it. In the word impression, it's like the idea of impressing, right?
Right.
And obviously, not every interaction you have is your future soulmate,
Right. You don't need a
unless
peacock for
you're
everyone.
you're in a permanent sort of massive polyamorous relationship. But that's not the case. No, but I mean, you're constantly trying to impress a supervisor, a friend, a spouse, a
Mhm.
prospective mate, a crush. So yeah, there's a lot of peacocking that goes on, like you said, subconsciously before we even become aware of the
That's
fact
true.
that we're in the middle of this critical first encounter moment. So
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think a lot of people realize that a lot of our daily life is a performance. So for so long as we exit our home and we're not just, in our pajamas or being in our most
Mm,
natural state,
mm,
even if we feel natural at work,
mm.
there's a level of performance there. And I think like
Yeah,
what you're saying in terms of peacocking is a type of performance.
yeah.
We're always trying to put on a show for people
Mm,
so that we can do what we need to do or get to where we need to get
yes,
to.
absolutely.
So going back to, when we first met, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I saw you standing at the reception and
Mm,
I remember thinking, why is no one helping this poor man? He's so sweaty and I'm
yes.
busy. I'm going off to do, my coaching. I had a group coaching.
In group class, yeah.
Yeah, a group class at the time. So just to give you some context, I was a CrossFit coach for
Mm,
quite some time and that's how we met. I always like to tell our story is that he found me through Google and so he was, you were on a research trip.
yeah, so at the time I was wrapping up well, I wasn't really wrapping up, I was 2018. So I was in the final research stages of my dissertation, and
Mm,
I happened to be specializing on the, Japanese occupation of Taiwan, which is why I was in Taiwan to do, history research. And basically, I went on Google and I typed CrossFit gym Taipei. I was consulting one of the national libraries in Taipei. And basically, I was like, all right, well, first thing that pops up is wonderful place by the name of Fung CrossFit. And I just email, the owner and I'm like, hey, I need a space to do Olympic weightlifting because I had a competition coming up in October. And yeah, so fast forward to what end of July 2018.
Yep.
I just settle into the little front entrance and I sit there with my gym bag and yeah, my beard. I had like a really,
It was
yeah, you
like
describe it better than I
just,
do.
it's not like your beard was out here because I don't think you can
No,
actually
I
grow
didn't have
that,
that
but it
capacity.
was just really kind of scruffy and messy.
Mm,
And come to find out after the fact, so it's
mm,
like again, definitely not from the first impression was what a terrible beard and what a sweaty mess. And
mm.
then later on I learned that because your clipper had broke.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so it's like you couldn't make
Yeah.
it nice. And so and my boss said, "Oh, he's just a drop in." So I just went, "You know what? I don't even need to bother talking to this person because, I have other clients to take care of."
Mm,
So
fair enough.
imagine that you didn't have another 10 days. How long was your trip? Like about 10 days?
Yes, a little longer than
Yeah,
that.
so
Yeah.
imagine that you had to leave literally that night and you were just in there for one session.
Yeah.
That would have been the end of our interaction.
And that's a complete timeline alteration right there. And so much of our life is these sort of chance encounters. It's insane
So true.
how, we try to plan and sort of envision our lives taking a certain shape or having a certain, sequence to it. But no, this was like, there's no way in which you could have convinced me of this particular outcome of this particular, setup.
Well, what was your first impression of me?
Well, it's kind of neutral. It was like, that's one of the coaches. So what happened is I walk in, I set up, put my bag down, and one of the coaches slash receptionists at the time, she's really, really friendly, and she's kind of settling me in, telling me, "Ah, just hold up, class is finishing." So I'm seeing like this side, right, and then there's kind of like a wall, and then there's the whole room where the weights and the
Mhm.
training and then the working out actually happens.
Yep.
And so the receptionist kind of screams. She goes, "This is a different conversation she was having." She's like, "Hey, Kat, what's the Chinese word for asparagus?" And then there's a bit of like a delay. And then you kind of pop into the scene and you're like, "I don't know. It's like," and then what's the Chinese word for asparagus again?
芦笋.
Loose one. There we go. And then walks back in, continues coaching.
No,
And
and also you forgot this one little detail is that I wasn't annoyed, but because I was in the middle of, like, trying to rile up, like, a
mm,
a metcon
yeah,
to
it's
try
a
to be like, "Come on,
CrossFit.
guys, it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
CrossFit class," you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, 芦笋, and I just, like, popped back out.
And I just went, huh. Oh, internally, I was like, huh, must be one of the coaches. And that was it.
Well, thankfully, it was neutral. Now
Yeah.
imagine on a different timeline
Mm,
that we didn't meet in a gym.
sure.
And you just saw me walking down the street with remember that time when I was borrowing my mom's pants, like these shorts? And they were just so baggy.
Oh,
And
God.
then I borrowed like I'm pretty sure like my sister-in-law's t-shirt. And then I was wearing like sandals and like
Mm,
I had my fanny pack across
yeah.
and I was just remember
Uh,
that time when I
no,
just
oh, yeah.
completely
And
nailed fashion?
oh, no, and I mean, folks, you really wanna stare into the future, look at your mother or father-in-law because what they say is you kinda look at your in-laws and you're like, "Oh my god, that's gonna be," but it was like this spitting image of your mom, but with, like, yeah, the most, like, relaxed attire, fanny
It was
pack,
very
like,
comfortable.
it's like
Like,
a
I was
pink.
very tempted to actually keep that outfit because of how comfortable it
And then
was.
I took a picture to the picture which will be visible in the frame, around here, and you're making a face like, I mean, on purpose, obviously.
I looked at
Maybe,
the picture and I went, "No, you're right. I should never dress like that."
I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's very comfortable clothing.
But imagine you saw me like
Okay,
that just
fair enough.
walking down the street, and
Yeah,
that was our entire
yeah,
non-interaction or
yeah.
interaction.
So then the whole, I wouldn't have married you in a different timeline. Yeah, okay. I can see it going both ways. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but, like, thankfully, we had the opportunity to talk a little bit
Mm,
more, to find common ground with, like, weightlifting because I was also
mm.
gearing up for a competition.
That's true. Yeah, you were.
Yeah, yeah. So I was about to do a weightlifting
Mm,
competition down in a different city in Taichung. And so we got talking and then yeah, we started bonding over like birthdays and stuff. And so from there, that initial judgment, like very quickly,
mm,
in our case,
yeah.
faded away.
I think though, yeah, confirmation bias is a thing. Confirmation bias confirms a lot of what we already see, what we scan, that quick judgment, right? It's like, yeah, I'm gonna look for information that confirms,
To try to confirm that.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
but maybe there's a weird way in which sometimes when you have the luxury of time, when you have like
Mm,
a much longer stretch of getting to know a person and being vulnerable and opening up and having all sorts of, you know, aimless chit chat about, like, we bonded over birthdays, like, oh, your birthday's, you know, this, and mine is that. And then it somehow got somewhere.
mm,
But you don't always have that luxury, that
no.
that window of opportunity in many different settings, especially if it's not a date or any kind of possible romantic encounter. It's like a split second.
Well, think about, like, auditions, right? So,
Mm,
like, when my time as an actress trying to make it in New York, it's like you're in line with, like, 500 people lining all the way down the fire escape and then around the building to
yeah,
try to score literally 8 to 10 seconds of time with the director, and you may not even get that.
yeah,
And so when you do get to walk through the room, you really wanna make sure you nail that first impression
yeah,
because otherwise it's like, "Thanks, no thanks," you know,
yeah,
and you could literally do the best thing that you prepared for,
mm,
and maybe they won't even look up at you.
yeah,
And then that's the end of that interaction unless you get,
mm,
really lucky that you audition for a different show of the same director,
yeah,
that you get that second chance, you know what
yeah.
I mean? But most of the time, interviews,
Well,
auditions,
yeah, you're talking about, like, I mean, I've never auditioned for anything in the performing world, but it's like literally, I'm sure it's like a neutral panel of cold looking people,
I
and
mean,
then they're like,
sometimes they're friendly.
okay.
Depends, but
I
sometimes they might be in a crappy mood, you know?
So, but yeah, so you have to deliver in that very short window of time. And then job interviews, which is the other thing I can probably relate to here, whether in the academic world or in the world of, you know, international schooling,
Mm,
it's crazy. Like, you're in a little Zoom frame
yeah.
and
I think
you're
that's harder.
that's harder.
Yeah.
And it's like these people are looking at the way you're dressed, your body language, how much you're
Mhm.
smiling,
Yeah.
and they're making all sorts of rapid fire decisions about,
Mhm.
okay, is this person, you know, genuine? Are they going to be a good colleague? Are they going to be just a great fit for the school?
Yeah.
And yes, of course, you know, you can deliver a killer pitch about your teaching philosophy or your academic project or about, you know, all your qualities as a whatever, right? And but I think subconsciously there's still a lot of like, yeah, it's kind of already set in stone,
Yeah,
and
no,
now we're looking
definitely.
for that confirmation.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the thing. It's just like us talking about first impressions
Mm,
isn't to give you more anxiety
mm,
about, oh my God, I need to be perfect.
yeah,
No, it's actually to be able to tell like what is within our control and
mm,
what is not within our control. So it's
yeah,
like we can't control how they're going to see us,
absolutely,
but we can control how we present ourselves to
yeah,
the best of our abilities. How do we prepare? How do we
yeah,
talk? How do we dress?
mm,
You
mm,
know,
mm,
things. I was actually talking to my friend the other day, some friend, also client. We were training. I was training her, and she's a doctor, and she had to hire some new doctors in. She said like she sat through several rounds of interview, and she was exhausted that day. And she said it's just baffling how people, even doctors, and these
mm,
are some of the smartest people, in the country,
yeah,
still couldn't interview right. Like
mm,
one, suppose they were doing Zoom, like
yeah,
online as well. One was doing it from his bed, like just sitting on his bed doing
yeah,
an interview as
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
doctor, and another one was, I don't know, wearing like gym clothes. It's just
Okay, yeah.
bizarre.
I mean, no, and like dressing to impress, it sounds like a cliche thing we hear time and time again, but I've seen its power on not adults, I've seen it on teenagers.
Mm,
I go to Model United Nations conferences. It's part of my role at where I teach. So I got to take a bunch of teenagers to another school.
mm.
They dress up, they role play as a country, as a delegate, right? And I've never seen, you know, my students and some of the other students from my school so focused, so professional, you know, so formal.
Yeah.
And I think that there's real power in putting on that attire
Mm,
and looking like your absolute best.
yeah.
I think it disciplines you and it sends very subtle signals to the rest of your mind and body that,
Mm,
hey, we're here to impress, we're here to put on a show,
yeah.
we're here to put on our best foot forward. And yeah, and then they, you know, they go back to just being teenagers after
It
that.
does
And
change their
yeah,
tone. Like
it
I
does.
know some
Yeah.
of your students, and so I know how goofy they can be.
Mhm.
And when I saw them in their pristine suits and how they're
Yeah.
all, it's like, "What? We've been telling you to
Yeah.
just sit up straight, stand up
Yeah.
tall, speak clearly." All of a sudden, because of that suit,
Mhm.
they were doing
And
it.
they're, they're writing resolutions, and they have to like get these
Sure.
resolutions to pass, and it's like, we're talking about like autonomous AI weapons or refugee and displacement kind of issues, right? You'd think you're either at the actual UN or you're in
Mm,
the middle of a high powered law firm,
yeah.
but they're teenagers, and I'm gonna say, yeah, they're smart as hell, and then
Mhm.
they do good research
Yep.
to conduct these conferences. But I think the subtle dawning on of a
Mm,
suit makes a world of difference.
yeah.
Another good example, a friend of mine, he's a very successful historian. Winning a tenure track academic job is like, might as well win the lottery. It's a very tough thing to achieve in my field.
Yeah.
And really fascinating. He tells me every time he's up for any kind of big interview, he goes and he buys a pretty expensive suit,
Mm,
like, a
mm,
couple $1,000s, the jacket, the shirt, the tie, the cufflinks,
mm,
just little detailing like that goes a long way.
yeah.
And yeah, and he's managed to secure about 2 or 3 plus really great tenure track positions.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he's a world class scholar and thinker, but I do think that it's that additional preparation. And so we don't think about how a little goes a long way. These
Absolutely.
micro improvements.
It's so true. Even just like, in acting, we talk about even just a shoulder position can
Mm,
change the messaging. Say that I'm sitting, talking to you straight shouldered versus if I were to do this, it gives you a completely different
yeah,
vibe as the person who's receiving
yeah,
it. Or like if I tilt my chin up versus
mm,
tilting my chin down, looking down. And these are all like little acting tricks to kind of, make a character more leaning towards friendly and warm or a little bit more like mischievous. Like
mm.
notice how all the villains, they do this. They
Oh,
tuck
I
their
see.
chin
That's
down, they
interesting.
look up. And so
Sorry.
and so it's like whether it's little tweaks to your external facial expression, body posture,
Mm,
or just putting on, a nice suit, it really does kind of make your entire communication a lot more embodied.
yes.
And it signals to your brain that, hey, we're doing something different from just
Yeah.
me,
Something important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For this context, right?
Yeah, it's almost like, oh my God, there's this legendary story about, and it's appeared in so many texts about how to achieve greatness and improve performance. I think it was the British cycling team. They
Mm,
were like absolute, like the worst of the worst, and they began making these tiny improvements on like the bicycle seats, the amount of sleep they got, and like these micro adjustments.
yeah,
And over time, that added up to them actually becoming top dogs in
yeah,
the field of cycling. And
right.
it's always used in any kind of text on building habits or motivation
Mm,
and performance, right? It's
mhm,
an example of actually sometimes it's the details that count.
yeah,
It's all these sort of subtle little things that you can do
yeah.
to give you
So
that extra percentage.
speaking on that, it's like I've been watching this reel about the Blue Angels,
Mm,
and so how they practice is that they're sitting in a room and they're each just eyes closed. They're mimicking everything, and it's like you think that oh well they're just pretending. Well they're not. They're rehearsing everything,
mm,
and that's again a way to signal to your brain,
yeah.
hey, prepare for this
Yeah.
in this way, And so I do think that all of these little things are things that we can control to help boost that first impression or when the
Mm,
curtains go up or
yeah.
when things kind of like oops,
Yeah.
need to ramp up.
No, absolutely. And I think it's important. First impressions they're very quick, but they're also context dependent. There's
Hmm.
always a way in which you can harness the power of different things to make that impression. And so, for example, when we first met, shortly after you saw me, you were like, "Oh, weird guy,
Weird sweaty.
French guy, French Canadian." Turns out she obviously had that label in her mind. And then obviously we get to the weight room and I start warming up and I start lifting. And I remember subconsciously I kind of vividly remember this. It was a 60, 70% snatch day. For those of you, the snatch, the bar is overhead. And it's my favorite movement. I
Mm.
love that was my go to thing. I loved refining my technique, all that stuff.
That's what he was trying to show me.
And in that moment, even though you weren't like the sort of the target audience because I was focusing on my training,
Mm.
I remember just like really wanting to polish up my movement. I don't know why. It's like there's someone in front of me. And I think we do this at the gym, guys and perhaps girls as well. there's someone we want to impress, and suddenly we tighten up our form. Maybe we'll add a little bit of extra weight. In this case, though, I was just kind of, you know, making sure that I was as sharp as ever on the snatch, and no further interactions.
Yeah.
Nothing took place. I packed up my bags. I went home. She also went her separate ways. But what did you say the next day when you first met me formally?
I remember this because when I first met you, it was that sweaty time. And then what propelled me to actually want to say something was definitely that, whatever that was, because it caught my attention. And the next day when I saw him, I went up to him and I said, "Your lifting's quite something." I don't think I did the eyebrow flick,
Yeah,
but you talk about like that subconscious posturing or wanting to
yeah,
impress someone. It was also me trying to act cool. Like, I'm totally just putting it out
just putting it
there.
out there.
No problem there. Didn't notice that much, but
And for the internet, like it's my yeah, my best all time snatch is 101 kilos at like 70 something
still
something.
very good.
It's not bad. I'm not an Olympian, all right, but still, it was one of these things where I really was nerdy about snatch technique.
And strangely enough, I was also very nerdy about technique because I was also a weightlifting coach. I was CrossFit and weightlifting coach. And so
Mm,
I actively coach people about their technique. That's
mm,
my brand as a movement coach, is that I'm so nerdy about technique. And so for some reason, he didn't know that, but he was just, I guess, it was a Hail Mary to like try
yeah,
to see if that would get my attention. And lo and behold.
yeah. What's really fascinating is, I guess now in hindsight, it's like perhaps there was a little bit of peacocking. There was
Mm,
a little bit of the body kind of responding before the mind, or maybe some subtle mechanism had activated. I needed to somehow put on a bit of a show,
like a,
like a because we know, yeah, in the evolutionary psychology, it's chock full of really interesting
I love those
pap-
videos.
papers and theories about how we evolved.
Oh, I was talking about like the birds
Oh, the
and how
bird.
they how they
Well,
like.
that's the thing. So much of evolutionary psychology, like the really interesting research, comes from the animal world, and
Mm,
noticing that male birds, like different species with elaborate plumage and beautiful patterns, it's there because that species evolved where the male has to compete, peacock for the attention of the female.
yeah.
And that's the way of the male side showing their fitness, their readiness to reproduce and have offsprings.
So in this case, it was how you could weight lift, groceries.
Yeah, see,
Sure.
that's how far you can take evolutionary psychology sometimes. No, and then it reminds me actually that there's a real paper that kind of confirms this, or that actually tested this. It's really fascinating.
Mm,
But there was a study in it's 2010, I believe. I know this like the back of my hands because I have to teach it as part of DP psychology.
yeah.
Ronay and von Hippel, 2010.
Mm,
I forget the exact details of the original study, but pretty much goes like this. They go to a skate park and they have a very attractive female researcher
mhm,
and a male researcher. The female researcher, she's a plant. She's there filming them doing tricks, but really, she's actually like an actress that's been
mm,
hired. And then the guys, they'll do their tricks, right? And after that, they'll sit down with the female researcher, get a testosterone sample through saliva,
mm,
and then they'll do another trick in front of the male researcher. And to make a long story short, they found that in the presence of the female researcher, the skateboarders did much riskier tricks, like much more
mm.
high level tricks. Testosterone levels were also elevated in the case of the demonstration in front of the female
Yeah,
researcher.
yeah,
So it is a thing. Like under these conditions, we will sort of put on this show, put on this
yeah,
display of greatness and risk taking and stuff
yeah.
like that. So yeah, all this to say that
I feel like girls do that too,
okay, yeah. So what are
like,
some examples of that?
being in the gym, being a trainer in the gym for like a decade, you see like girls try to like, there are girls who try to put a little
Mm,
bit more weight. I do that.
yeah.
Sometimes when I'm subconscious trying to impress those around me,
Mm,
I will try to put on a little bit more weight and I'll
mm.
suffer back pain for like a week
Yeah,
afterwards.
exactly.
But like maybe they puff their chest out a little bit more when they're doing like their curls. Maybe in their program it was supposed to be, I don't know, just like some sit-ups.
Yeah.
And then now they change it
Mm,
because they want to posture in a more feminine way. We definitely
yeah.
see that all the time.
No, absolutely.
Now for me though, I remember how I postured was when I remember this time you were walking down the stairs to Fun CrossFit, and we're
Mm,
in the basement. I'm talking to my boss who's sitting down, and I'm standing next to the counter. And I remember I knew what time you were coming. So
Mm,
you always showed up around like 10 something.
yeah.
And so I'm looking at the clock and then I hear footsteps and I'm like this. I'm fixing my posture to look nonchalant, but also kind of like which now
Okay.
thinking back, it's quite funny.
So see that detail, I wasn't aware. Actually, either you told me that like ages ago, or I completely forgot that. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I think for the audience, it's important to hear that, like we said, those first impressions, you don't get that luxury of many, many days and many, many encounters.
Mm.
But you're always going to be in some kind of setting, some kind of context or situation where you can take advantage, harness the power of a little detail. It could be the way you dress, it could be your body language, the way you approach people, your smile, right? So
I think smile is
what are
such
some
an underrated one.
yeah,
Like, I think people just they know that, but they don't do it.
yeah,
This advice I give a lot of my clients and people who come to me
mm,
for suggestions, and I say, you just smile a little bit,
mm,
and then they'll be like, oh,
yeah,
it becomes unnatural
yeah,
because they're not used to just naturally smiling on like a
mm,
low stakes, time. Like they're
level, yeah,
yeah, low stakes level. Those are the times that you need to practice smiling so
mm,
that when it matters, you're not gonna look like a badger. Like this is how I
yeah,
smile. I think that's a really easy one to just practice smiling. Your
yes,
eyes are really important.
mm,
So all the little things. So yeah, to summarize, what are some actionable steps that you guys can use right away? We
mm,
talked about just dressing a little bit, pay a little bit more attention to
yeah.
how you dress, maybe your hair, put a little bit of makeup if you're comfortable with that. And for guys as well.
No, I do think that like a self-care routine, whether it's a morning and nightly kind of face wash routine, perfume, like
Yeah,
honestly,
perfume's nice.
for
A nice
me,
touch.
I've been sort of really into this idea of rituals. There was a great piece I saw recently about the importance of rituals in our
Mm,
lives. And a self-care routine doesn't sound like much of it's a routine as opposed to a ritual. But for me, at least, I define it as a kind of a ritual, sort of a really important thing that I do,
yeah.
that I go out of my way to clean my face, put on perfume, and sometimes I'll even like choose my clothes the night before, especially if it's more like a formal thing that I got to do, like if I have to deliver a talk to parents, or I have to get on stage for an assembly. It's that intentionality. Like you're choosing to take these concrete little steps to set up the architecture of your first impressions and
Yeah.
be like, I'm going to dress like this. I'm going to look confident. I'm going to smell nice. And I think it's also like if you tell yourself this kind of stuff over and over again through your actions, it kind of becomes a reality.
Yeah, and it also ties back to what you were saying earlier. Like by the action of these rituals, it puts your brain in a
Yeah.
particular loop of be like, hey, we're getting ready for something,
Yeah.
and so I think all these little things they do matter and they
Mm,
do add
mm,
up. And I'm not saying it needs to be anything elaborate. It
mm.
needs to be something that as small and consistent that you
Yes.
can do.
Yeah.
So if like all of this, like a whole face routine, perfume, it sounds too much to you, just
Sure.
pick like one thing.
Yeah.
Let's say like you never brush your hair in the morning and your hair's always like 5 different
Yeah.
ways. Just start with, I'm gonna brush my hair
Yeah.
every morning
Yeah.
just to look a little nicer and awesome.
Yeah.
And that's it until that becomes natural.
Yeah.
Then you can add things.
Of course.
This is the kind of advice I always give to my fitness clients when
Mm.
I was actively coaching is that don't try to do everything at once
Yeah.
for the change that you desire.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're just going to be overwhelmed and you're going to fall off the bandwagon.
No, you want stickiness.
Yeah.
You want sort of sticky habits, and over time, the sticky habits they pile on, and then that becomes kind of a system that you build for how you manage these important events, these important interactions. How
Yeah.
you like to go back to my friend who has all of these really successful interview
Mm,
outcomes. Yeah, every time he like comes up for one, he always like days ahead. He's like, "Oh yeah, I got my suit nice and pressed.
yeah.
It's ready to go.
Yeah.
I got these cufflinks. I'm gonna have this choice of outfit."
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
yeah,
have a friend who, also very successful in his meetings, like when he has to pitch like a project to the
mm,
bosses and all that stuff. He always says, I have my tailor-made suit, I have
mm,
all these things. So there seems to be a pattern there
yeah,
that this works.
yeah,
It's definitely like, sure, there are other things that are
yeah.
involved, but this is something little that you can control that you can do right away.
And it's not like, of course, we can say there are optics. People will look at you as like more well off or successful, or somehow more talented if you don on a suit. And we're not saying that you need to fake your way through these interactions,
Mhm.
but I do think that someone who makes the effort to prepare, to kind of pay attention to those details,
Yeah.
perhaps they'll be perceived as, "Oh, that person put in some kind of effort."
That person is attentive to details, and
Exactly.
that is a quality that, potentially employers are looking
Mm,
for, or mate is looking for, or
yeah.
whatever. And so attention to detail, being prepared, being
Mm,
organized, those are all things that you can say it on a resume. But imagine this, if you like
mm,
list out, I'm extremely detailed organized, detailed oriented,
yeah.
and so on and so forth, but you show up just like shirt not completely tucked in,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh sorry, I forgot this, I forgot that.
Yeah.
It's not going to look well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another thing that we should definitely bring into the conversation here is the Zoom frame, because now we've been talking about real life, but also like, interviews now largely take place online
Yeah.
or digitally in some way, shape, or form. That's another really funny detail. For example, a Zoom interview in academia or maybe in teaching as well, you want to look like you got a nice big shelf of books behind you. You are a learned scholar. You got your pile of academic monographs and other fancy books behind you.
Mm,
And again, this is my buddy with his suits. He literally shows me the bookshelf from which he interviews.
yeah,
And then in person, he'll deliver the suits and some of the fanfare.
yeah.
But it's like, that's another important detail, how you appear in the frame. Like, when you use the blurry thing on, so you're just kind of like, I
I use
don't know.
that.
No, it's fine. But like, I don't know. I've always thought that, like, well, what if they think, like, why are you blurring out
Then
you
what do you
hide?
have to hide?
You
No,
kind of,
but what's funny is that nowadays there's with like AI and technology,
yeah,
you could just get a green screen
yeah,
or a blue screen and then just superimpose like a bookshelf.
just exactly.
But if they would be like, "Oh, I see that you have this book behind you." Yep, I can totally get it
Yeah.
for you right now. So yeah,
So yeah, no,
there's definitely a fine line
like,
between
don't fake it.
don't fake it.
Try to
If you
make it.
don't have books, what can you do?
If you don't have books, maybe default to the blur. If you don't have books, I mean, just
Just a clean
a
background.
clean background, a minimalist design.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that, for me, I'm a big believer in no clutter. No clutter equals more focus. Actually, I don't know if this would be testable in terms of Zoom interviews, but
Mm.
there are some studies that show that visual clutter, serves as a kind of distraction. It
Mm. It
impairs
does.
focus and cognitive performance. So
Well, just
one,
think about how many times you've like watched maybe like a reel or a YouTuber or whatever,
mm,
and they're not designing the background,
yeah,
and you end up looking like, why is there a cord? Or end up like
yeah.
you're looking at everything but the person.
So one wonders if the interview panel is looking at you and there's just a clean wall with a simple shelf and like a little potted plant, their sort of field of vision is definitely more focused
That's
on
right.
you. Whereas if it's this kind of abundance of random trinkets, or like our old place in Jubei when we lived in Taiwan, it's like, this is like a bunch of crap behind us. There was like exercise equipment and,
I mean, we
I mean,
exercise.
we do, yeah, but that's the
No, but
thing.
I get what you mean. Much like how my friend said, like, one person just showed up on his bed. That's
Amazing.
that
Awesome.
is a massive
Yeah,
distraction.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but because it's like, it's
I
also like,
highly doubt that the bed was made.
yeah, well, no, that's a good question. Yeah,
I mean, unless
that's a good,
he's like posing, be like, "This is
yeah,
where I hang out."
yeah. No, but then
What are you trying to
the
say?
next level would be like, you collapse from a workout, you're sweaty, and you're
Well,
on
that's
that the
the
black
other that's
mats,
the
and then you do the interview,
that's the
lying
other
down.
interviewee is that she showed up in her gym wear as if she had
Yeah,
just finished a
yeah.
workout or on her way to a workout.
We're
It's
not.
like,
It's not to shame. Not like, oh my god, this is an outrage.
and that's the thing. It's just like it's not to shame people. You every time you go online, you have to be pristinely,
Mm,
with your customized suits. But if you desire a particular outcome, it shows that you care. Because if I'm going to a job interview, clearly I would like to have the
mm,
job and I know I'm competing against
yeah,
other candidates. I'm not going to show up in my gym clothes and be like, give it to me or whatever. I don't
yeah,
care because that's what they feel
yeah.
how much you care about this.
And then to go back to context, so a first impression, obviously you want to look your finest. For romance, something like us, but actually,
I was in gym gear, but
yeah, I was in gym gear,
for
but for
context, I
context,
was a coach, so
there we
I
go.
literally that's what I always wore. But yeah.
But social outings, like, you
Mm,
wouldn't, like, you meet a new batch of friends or a colleague. You just got a new job and now you're out with the
I'm not
colleagues.
gonna show up in gym gear.
Just either that or you show up in like your finest pressed suit and you deliver your firmest handshake. Yes, sir. You got to find the style, the demeanor, the vibe of how you're going to present yourself. It's got to match the context or the situation, or else we all kind of like we're just going to all be very square and yeah, no, time to
Yeah,
be super
no, that's
professional. I
it.
want to impress you. It's like, what are you trying to, like, who are you trying to impress?
That's right. You have to be able to read the room as well. And that not just, how you dress, not how you posture yourself, but also kind of how you speak. You said like everyone's going to be all squared. That's not what we want because
Yeah.
everyone is unique. We have different personalities and backgrounds and all that stuff. That's what makes the dynamic interesting and
Yeah.
we shouldn't feel ashamed of who we are. You should definitely keep your quirks and your personality
Mm.
such as if you're really into, like, potty humor, then do that, but if you are talking to, say, like, the big bosses, maybe keep that for your mates or something like that, so,
Yeah.
but
No,
if you're
yeah.
gonna go to, like, a social gathering, maybe you're not gonna be like, "Hello, it is a pleasure to
Yeah.
meet you,"
Yeah.
and
That's true.
you kinda just yeah, read the room.
No, for sure. Yeah, read the room. That's super important. And at the end of the day, there's a couple takeaways we can use here to wrap this up and tell the audience how to nail those first impressions. I think number one, dress to impress, but dress for the occasion.
Yeah,
Also, dress to remind yourself what you're doing.
that's right.
Like again, it's important to prime the body physically and to prime, just the whole frame needs to be primed so that it is ready to enter the situation feeling like, all right, we're going to really nail the
Mhm.
interview, this first date,
Yep.
everything like that.
Yeah,
Right?
and number 2, speak clearly and speak, read the room, know who you're talking to and how
Absolutely.
you can adjust, we're very not malleable, we're very,
No,
dynamic,
we're dynamic. We're, be flexible.
flexible with
No,
how you interact with people, right?
yeah,
There's no one way and there's no right one way.
yeah, no, there isn't. And you'll find your groove.
Yeah,
And I think it's important for people
to
like,
find your
you
style.
know, you've nailed a first impression before. I've done it before. We've all had
And
good
I've
first
also had,
impressions.
like, things that has worked for me in one context, completely not work for me in a different context,
Exactly.
and that's completely okay as
Yeah.
well. So it's like you will find your style, your unique
Yeah.
style, and you will find, what works for what context, the
Yeah.
more you just try and experiment.
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of like you've already sort of said it, implied it, but number three, don't diminish your quirks. We may perceive them as faults, but don't downplay them.
Mm.
Like people are gonna see right through you if you're again like
Yeah, that's right.
like the like you're supposed to make eye contact, and then you're just kind of like, yeah, that of course
Yeah.
not. So that's a
Yeah.
good way to
Okay.
talk about first
Yeah,
impressions.
definitely. Next time, just remember the 3 things: dress nicely, speak clearly, don't diminish your quirks. Don't diminish your
Don't
quirks.
diminish your quirks. And I was going
Mhm.
to say, luckily, our first impression was not the last impression.
Yes. So, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe you might just find your soulmate too, or land your dream job, whichever comes first. All right. See you in the next episode.